Zepharon left Iconia's surface quietly, the ship rising above the canopy. Thesara was safe now in Valtorus' care, but his spark was far from still. As the ship broke the atmosphere, his optics drifted to the data drive retrieved from the wreckage. The description explained that she was born of a split spark. A split spark, thought Zepharon. He angled his flight toward the Cradle of Sparks, home of the Knight's Temple. He tried to recall what else the prophecy had read. It had always been Zepharon to keep an eye on Tombstone Glacier. Many souls had been lost to that moon, but for him there was another reason he closely watched it. The prophecy also mentioned that the divided spark would fall through flame and sky of blue, shall wake where ice devours the land. Zepharon had always thought of this as referring to Tombstone Glacier, although other knights had their skepticism regarding this idea. He landed on the green forested, organic world. Built into the landscape itself, the temple was grown from the will of the primes and the discipline of generations of knights. They trained in meditation and combat, and above all, restraint. Knights are fierce warriors in order to protect the worlds they are assigned to, but it is equally important to understand the responsibility of that training. Depending on the threat that arrived, they may need to fight one or many. In order to maximize their potential as single combatants, they also trained in stealth. Zepharon walked through the gates of the temple. As he did, a bell sounded once, low and resonant. Knights moved silently throughout the grounds. Some meditated near Icona plants. Some sat in the garden, reading from scrolls, and others trained in the courtyard, blades flashing through the air. His steps carried him beyond the meditation chamber as he turned toward the Sanctum. Zepharon was deep in thought when he was addressed by the Sanctum stronghold's guard, Bastion. "You seem troubled, young Zepharon," Bastion said. The guard at the threshold stood calmly, staff in hand and optics unreadable. His gray armor bore the knight's insignia, as well as additional decorations that Zepharon was unfamiliar with. The insignia on Bastion's staff were a glowing energon blue color. "Good morning, Bastion." Zepharon offered a knight's bow. Bastion returned the gesture. "What brings you to the Sanctum?" Bastion asked. Zepharon hesitated, then met the elder's gaze. "It is my desire to read the prophecy once more." Bastion's brow lifted slightly. "You, who has studied it more than any living knight? Surely you can recite it by now," Bastion said curiously. "I recall much of it," Zepharon said, "but memory is a poor substitute for reverence." He paused. "There was a wreckage on a Cybertronian escape pod on Tombstone Glacier." Bastion's eyes sharpened. "There, I found an injured Cybertronian, and she was born of a split spark." A long silence followed. Zepharon wondered if he had gone too far. Many disapproved of his obsession with the prophecy. But Bastion only turned and said, "Come." The Sanctum's inner wall was alive with history. Scrollwork was etched in ancient Cybertronian, humming faintly with the light. The prophecy, carved into the living stone, was glowing blue against the stone wall. Together they stood before it. Zepharon read aloud the verse he knew so well. "A spark once whole, now split in two, shall fall through flame and sky of blue. Torn from a twin by war's cruel hand, shall wake where ice devours the land." Yes, this is what Zepharon had remembered rather clearly. It was the beginning of the prophecy, so it was what he looked out for more than the other traits. But then again, many had crash-landed on that moon. Could this really be the subject of the prophecy? As Zepharon had paused to think, Bastion addressed him again. "What are you thinking, Zepharon?" Bastion asked. "I'm not sure. I'm known for looking for the subject of the prophecy. I suppose I want there to be a Cybertronian that can influence others. We knights operate in the shadows. We use stealth to protect species and, on occasion, end wars. Only we knights know we exist. We have become mere legend and myth to Cybertronians," Zepharon thought aloud. Bastion considered him for a moment, then said, "The prophecies of the past have come to light before. There is no reason to believe this one will be different." He then walked to look out to the temple. "I agree with you, Zepharon. We have fulfilled our duties and our oath as knights of the temple. These duties were entrusted to us by the original 13 primes. The ways of old have been lost, and through war upon war, the history of our people has been eroded. Someone will come to bring us into the light. Where is this Cybertronian now? Bastion asked. She is on Icona with Valtorus. The Icona. They bonded to her easily, Zepharon added. This prompted both of them to look at the next section of the prophecy. Though vine shall know her steady light, and rise to meet her in the night. Though others call and few are heard, she speaks in thought, not voice nor word. Both stood and took these words into consideration. Zepharon then read, She walks the path with purpose clear, a knight whose vow is held sincere. Though calm in stance her heart runs deep, where wrath and grief like thunder sleep. The war will come to earth below, where silence falls and shadows grow. There shall she choose to make her stand, with open heart and steady hand. Zepharon's voice was low. If she is the one, we must prepare her. Bastion nodded once. She is with Valtorus? Yes, resting and healing. The Icona have already reached for her. At this, Bastion offered the faintest smile. Then the forest believes what your spark already knows. Zepharon looked back at the wall. His mind raced with both hope and uncertainty. Zepharon then turned to Bastion. Bastion, thank you for showing me the prophecy once more. Bastion offered a knight's bow and said, I know you will train her well, Zepharon. Zepharon returned the bow. After leaving the sanctum, Zepharon stopped briefly at the meditation chamber. He looked inward, then skyward. The prophecy was beginning. The knights would soon come out of the shadows and into the light. Zepharon had returned to Icona and found Valtorus in meditation. Hearing the footsteps approaching, Valtorus rose to greet him. Back so soon? What did you find in the sanctum? Valtorus asked. Zepharon tilted his head and said, How did you know I went to the sanctum? Zepharon, you have read the prophecy more times than I believe anyone else has. Your optics have nearly worn the words from the wall, she responded, smiling. He turned to Thesara, who was already in better shape than when he had left. There were many Icona plants binding to her. She looks well, Zepharon said. Yes, the Icona did not need encouragement to bind to her. It was a curious thing. Valtorus frowned and looked at him. Zepharon, I know you said she may be the one, and I have never been one to either seek the prophecies or disregard them. But this Cybertronian, she is deeply troubled. Yes, the Icona bound to her, but have you felt her spark rhythm? It is angry and filled with pain. Zepharon thought for a moment at the words of the prophecy. Though calm in stance, her heart runs deep, where wrath and grief like thunder sleep. We cannot know whether she will fulfill the prophecy. All we can do is support her now. She binds easily to the Icona without guidance, but I do feel her anger. She is troubled, but she was just recently attacked. The emotions still run deeply through her, although not apparently severe enough to scare the Icona and prevent them from saving her, Zepharon responded. Well, we can wake her if you like, if you are ready to guide her, Valtorus asked. Yes, although there should be no mention of the prophecy to Thesara or anyone, I think, Zepharon said, looking to Valtorus. Valtorus nodded in agreement. She then placed her hand on Thesara's shoulder and focused on her spark's rhythm. Thesara walked along the stone walkway with energon lanterns hanging on either side. They emitted a faint hum and a soft blue glow. There were vines of some Icona plants trailing over the stone floor. She had been training in the Knight's Temple for several solar cycles following her recovery. Now, entering the combat chamber, she would practice wielding two blades. Slowly moving through the positions, she felt the blades begin to link with her. As they did, their movements were harmonious, and the echo of the light they emitted could be seen by Zepharon, who had arrived at the combat chamber. Zepharon had not known of any knight that had bonded so quickly with the Icona, nor one that had found such rapid control of the knight's armor. It was often late in training that this occurred. For some, it never did, and they were unable to successfully become knights. This posed a dilemma for Zepharon because much of his training was normally in helping form such connections with the semi-sentient and ancient organisms. Now he felt a necessity for caution and concern, as Thesara may become a powerful knight. While she had not shown any desire for power, having such control of these organisms may lead her astray. Never had a knight lost their way and turned on the Knights of the Temple, but the mentors always looked out for such a soul. They were powerful combatants that could hypothetically use that power to control or rule. Zepharon continued watching in silence. As he did, her movements became slightly more erratic, and her tranquility wavered. When it did, the blades acted as though they had been summoned to the ground and fused with it, no longer showing the faint glow. Zepharon watched as she calmly took to her knees beside the blades and meditated. After a minute or two, the blades released from the ground and began to glow gently. She stood. "You have quickly learned to bond with the armor, Thesara," Zepharon said, entering the chamber. Thesara bowed lightly and said, "Yes, sometimes I can wield it when I am focused." "And what broke your focus?" he asked. Thesara was holding the blades and they began to flicker. I remembered my brother," she replied. She was trying to keep her spark rhythm calm, but in remembering her brother it proved difficult. "What about him did you remember?" Zepharon asked. The blades fell to the ground with a loud thud and fused with it again. Thesara sighed. "Before we separated, we had an argument. He began to show an inclination to join the Decepticon cause. I was devastated and angry. I had been treating so many patients that were collateral damage of their battles." Zepharon simply watched her and waited. The silence stretched, not as a void, but as an invitation. At last, Thesara exhaled. She looked down at her blades and knelt beside them. "I should have left sooner," she said, barely above a whisper. Zepharon did not interrupt. "I knew we were supposed to depart quickly, but I waited. I told myself it was nothing, that a brief delay wouldn't matter, that seeing him, just once more, it was worth the risk." Her optics shut tightly, pain threading through her voice. "I was the last to board. I was the one who urged the others to hold. We could have been gone, but I lingered. And now they're all gone. The patients, the crew, everyone." The blades beside her remained dark, inert against the stone floor. Her hands trembled faintly. "I keep trying to believe that it was the Decepticons' fault, that they attacked without warning, that no one could have predicted it." She shook her head. "But part of me knows better. I made the call. I chose sentiment over safety, and I have to live with that cost." Zepharon stepped a little closer, his voice low. "It is not weakness to care, Thesara." She looked up at him sharply. "It is when it gets people killed." "No," Zepharon said gently. "It is weakness when it blinds us. But you see clearly now. You understand what your choices cost, and you carry that knowledge with you." She looked away, and for a long moment said nothing. Then quietly, "I wasn't supposed to survive, not when so many didn't." Zepharon lowered to one knee beside her. "Perhaps not," he said, "but the path does not always lead through justice or fairness. Sometimes it leads through aftermath, through what we do after we survive." Thesara had her optics closed and looked away from him. Zepharon could feel the rhythm of her spark. It had been erratic and fast, but it was calming now. As his gaze shifted toward the training blades, they pulsed once, softly, like a breath drawn in quiet resolve. Thesara reached forward again. She did not lift them. She simply rested her arms beside them, her frame still, her spark steadier. The blades responded, rising from the floor of their own accord, hovering lightly at her side, their glow subtle but unmistakable. Zepharon stood, watching her with solemn care. "You cannot undo what's behind you," he said, "but you may still shape what lies ahead." He paused, then added, "The sword is forged in heat. The healer must choose whether to harden or shatter." Thesara didn't answer, but her hands closed calmly around the hilts. This time, the blades did not fall. Zepharon's footsteps echoed softly through the hallowed halls of the Sanctum. Towering pillars of ancient alloy lined the chamber, etched with faint Cybertronian script that shimmered in low silver light. Beside him walked Bastion, the eldest of the knights, steward of the Sanctum, and protector of its deepest truths. She fights the war within her more than the one she's trained to face. Her brother's path causes constant turmoil, and yet she keeps walking, Zepharon said, his voice low and pensive. Bastion said nothing at first. They continued through the Sanctum's inner corridors, into a chamber lined with shelves of scrolls and inscribed stone tablets. The air was thick with memory. Zepharon watched as the elder moved toward a familiar desk nestled beside a shelf of weathered parchment. Bastion sat, drawing a scroll into the low light, unrolling it with reverent precision. He did not speak yet. At times, Zepharon wondered if Bastion even heard him when he did this, so often lost in the whisper of ink and prophecy. But Zepharon pressed on, his voice gentler this time. Once, long ago, you told me that some truths must remain hidden, that if prophecies are known, they might corrupt knights and make them seek it. Bastion looked up, his optics thoughtful. And I still believe that, but prophecy does not need a herald. It is not a map, it is a memory of what has yet to come. Zepharon hesitated, unsure whether to speak again, but the weight of what he carried pressed harder each day. I do not know how much more I can teach her, he confessed. She bonds with the Icona more deeply than I ever did. She finds calm without counsel, and her grief, her rage, she channels it with precision. It's becoming her power. Bastion studied the scroll in front of him. That power does not make her unworthy. It proves her intent is true. The Icona and the armor would not follow her otherwise. But if she falters, Zepharon asked, if she loses herself? They will not follow, Bastion said simply. The path demands alignment. The ancients ensured that if a knight sought conquest or vengeance, the gifts would leave them. Power without purpose is not the way of the knights. Zepharon slowly exhaled, shoulders relaxing slightly. Bastion watched him for a long moment, then, after a pause, unrolled the scroll fully and motioned him closer. Come, he said. Zepharon approached and looked down. The ancient script shimmered faintly beneath the light. Bastion began to read aloud. A spark once whole, now split in two, shall fall through flame and sky of blue. Torn from a twin by war's cruel hand, she'll wake where ice devours the land. The vine shall know her steady light, and rise to meet her in the night. Though others call and few are heard, she speaks in thought, not voice nor word. She walks the path with purpose clear, a knight whose vow is held sincere. Though calm in stance, her heart runs deep, where wrath and grief like thunder sleep. The war will come to earth below, where silence falls and shadows grow. There shall she choose to make her stand, with open heart and steady hand. Yet shadows deep may cloud the spark, and oath may fracture in the dark. She'll stand where self and silence war, not fallen, broken, then something more. Her brother lost yet not forgot, she strikes the wound to save the lot. In choosing pain her spark shall fade, a night once more, her oath repaid. Her spark shall fade. Zepharon read the words several times over. Thesara was to die. The words struck him like a pulse to the chest. But she has to die, he said, shaken. The subject of this prophecy will choose this fate to fulfill their oath, Bastion said. But we don't know if it's her, Zepharon said, almost pleading. It could be anyone. Someone not yet forged. Anyone. Bastion did not answer. Zepharon looked away, overwhelmed. After a long pause, Bastion spoke again, soft but unyielding. You do not train her to survive, Zepharon. You train her to stand. And if that stand is her last, then she will fall as the greatest of us ever did, not for glory, but for life. Zepharon turned to face him fully, anguish breaking through his composed facade. He was always the calm one, the centered one, but not now. She must not know, Bastion said, his tone final. Let her choose the path because it is right, not because it is written. Zepharon's fist clenched at his sides. He nodded slowly and turned away, one hand lifting to press against his head as the weight of it all bore down. Another verse echoed in his thoughts. Her brother lost, yet not forgot, he remembered. So her brother, he can't be dead, can he? Zepharon asked Bastion. Bastion shook his head. I believe that with their split spark, she would know for certain if her brother was dead. But the prophecy does not use the word dead. It uses the word lost, Bastion said. So it might refer to him simply having lost his way. This is what Thesara fears. He was sympathetic to the Decepticon cause, after all. Zepharon was pacing in the room now. Zepharon remembered the next line. She strikes the wound to save the lot. He shut his optics tight, thinking this was something Thesara would do. She would sacrifice herself for others without hesitation. In fact, while learning the next verse of the prophecy scared him, he also found it something he already knew to be true regarding Thesara. She would do anything to save others. Zepharon then looked at the other added verse, then whispered, She'll be broken. Bastion's expression was unreadable. Not fallen, he said, but fractured, shadowed, Zepharon murmured. The spark clouded. She will be tested, Bastion said, beyond the reach of blades. This is the war within. Doubt, isolation, fear of her own nature. Zepharon's gaze flickered to the next lines. She'll stand where self and silence war. He nodded slowly. This has already begun. And she will rise again, Bastion added. Not the same, but more. Zepharon looked down at the verse again. That verse, it feels like something she's already living. The silence, the restraint, her guilt over her brother, her guilt over the transport. The fracture, it's not just coming, it's here. And yet, Bastion said softly, she still walks forward. Zepharon closed his optics, thinking. When he opened them again, his focus had changed. Her spark shall fade. The line echoed in his spark like a shadow just beyond the light. He did not want her to be the subject of the prophecy, but deep down he knew she was. All he could do was walk beside her until the end. Silence stretched as Zepharon processed these new verses and the fate of his knight in training. Bastion sat quietly observing Zepharon and thinking. Then Zepharon broke the silence. I should go to the meditation chamber, Bastion. I appreciate your counsel and sharing the next verses with me, Zepharon said with a light bow. Bastion returned the bow with dignity. In time, all will know the full prophecy, but not today. Zepharon nodded again, the movement heavy. Then he left in silence, footsteps lost to the sacred hush of the Sanctum.